Hey, what is going on, everybody? Thank you for watching my video today. NFL free agency continues to roll along into its third day. Well, technically, today's the first day if you go by what the NFL claims. But we all know Monday was the real start of free agency. But whether you consider this the first day or the third day, nonetheless, a lot of big moves happened today, as well as all the moves that have already been reported becoming official as the new league year officially started at 4 p.m. today on Wednesday. And there was a lot of moves that happened today. No true game changers for the most part, but a lot of solid veterans who could really help their new teams. And what I take away from this day was that it was the day of the pass rushers on the market, because a lot of pass rushers, a lot of defensive end linebacker types signed, and obviously the biggest signing, both in number and in name, to come out of today was the Buffalo Bills signing Von Miller to a 6-year, $120 million contract. Now, I was under the impression that Von was either going right back to the Rams, maybe even taking some sort of veterans discount, considering his age, he's almost 33 now, or there's rumors he would go to the Cowboys to replace Randy Gregory after he signed with Denver. So my literally dropped when I saw that he was signing with the Bills, but then only a minute later, my jaw should have dropped once again when I saw the figures. This 6-year contract, 120 million, will take Von into his 38-year-old season, age 38 season. Off the top of my head, this might not be totally factually accurate, but I can only think of guys like Deion Sanders and maybe Reggie White, if I'm correct, that played into that age as a quality defensive player. I mean, we know Deion Sanders, he retired, unretired, stuff like that. He was even on the Ravens in 2004, I believe. But Von is, of course, a Hall of Fame player, so I'm not saying that it's impossible for him to continue to play at that level 6 years from now, but it's a tall task for sure. But in the present, in the next few seasons, this is a huge deal for the Bills. They've been solid on defense for quite some time. They've obviously been a perennial playoff team over the past 5 years, only missed the playoffs one time in that span in 2018. That was Josh Allen's rookie season. Since then, they've been a threat in the AFC. And the Bills, with the AFC getting even better this offseason, obviously everyone's been saying it's the most competitive conference by far compared to the NFC. And the Bills certainly needed some extra help on defense. Not that they're bad, but you can't really say that they had a top-notch elite pass rusher on the team. Now, is Von Miller still an elite pass rusher? That's the question we all have to ask, I suppose. Now, there's two counter arguments here. One argument is that Von has dealt with some injuries, notably I believe it was an Achilles tear. He missed all of the 2020 season. He's also dealt with some other minor injuries over the past few seasons. And also that the fact that he's 32 years old could suggest that a slip-off is coming in the not too distant future for Von Miller, and that this signing could be something the Bills highly regret. Of course, in the NFL, it's a lot easier to get off players with big salaries than, per se, the NBA, but 120 million pretty much assures that Von is at least getting some substantial amount of that guaranteed. Not all of it, of course, but certainly a good amount. But the flip side is that Von Miller still had almost 10 sacks this year, 9.5, which is solid. Not $120 million worth, but 9.5 sacks is nothing to scoff at. And he did that between two different teams, the Rams and the Broncos, of course. But come playoff time, he was absolutely crucial to the Rams Super Bowl championship when he had 4 sacks in the 4 games the Rams played, proving that he was an absolutely necessary addition at the trade deadline for Los Angeles. They really did a good job. They only had to give up, I believe it was a second and a third to get him. So Denver got some extra picks out of that, which they're going to need to rebuild the defense around Russell Wilson. Not around Russell Wilson, he's not a defender, but to help Russell Wilson succeed in that division. So my thing with Von Miller here is, another thing, this is a bit of a cross-sport comparison. So the one recent move like this I can think of is that when the Heat signed Jimmy Butler to that big contract, when he hit free agency leaving the Sixers, people are like, Jimmy Butler is going to be 35 when this deal's up and he's going to be making close to $40 million. That's got to be risky. But the Heat, they just wanted to get a star on their team. And Jimmy Butler, his first year there during that bubble, he took the Heat to the playoffs. And this year, the Heat are the current number 1 seed. They weren't half bad last year either. So different sport, of course. Players age a bit faster in the NFL usually, but I would think from that perspective, the Bills are looking at the next 3 years, because their Super Bowl window is right now, and they needed to pay that money. Maybe there was, I clearly, if the Bills are giving this contract out, that big a contract when a lot of fans on Twitter, analysts even seem to think that that's a bit of an overpay, but clearly there must have been some competitor here because the Bills would not have. They're smart. Brandon Beane's a good GM. Smart. It's a smart front office. They wouldn't have just handed 120 million over if they didn't have to. So clearly there's some sort of bidding war here, but the Bills wanted to get their man and they did. So maybe they'll wind up being a little upset with the production Von gives his last 2 or 3 seasons, but this is a win now move for the Bills. I gotta say I'm kind of a fan of it. It's certainly an overpay. I of course admit that. But looking at the Bills, you could argue they could have signed some of these other guys that got signed today. But at the end of the day, I think Von Miller's ceiling, his upside, is higher than anybody else that was on the open market at the pass rusher position. So I'm a fan of this signing for the Bills. It's going to be needed in a very competitive AFC. So moving on to another AFC signing, the Raiders signed Chandler Jones, the former NFL sacks leader, I think 2 times over with the Cardinals, to a 3-year, $51 million deal. Now, Chandler Jones, he had a solid season last year. Now, he finished with 10.5 sacks, but 5 of those sacks came in the Week 1 win over the Titans. If you remember that thrashing the Cardinals gave Tennessee in Week 1. So, really, in the last 16 games, which would have been a full season any other year, he only had 5.5 sacks. And that's a little troubling, but at the same time, Chandler Jones has the reputation. He's, in my opinion, he's a future Hall of Famer. I'm not sure people really think of him that way, the same way they think of a Von Miller. But he certainly has earned that if you look at his numbers. He's been an elite pass rusher for a long time. Similar to Von, he was hurt in the 2020 season, missed most of that season with I think it was a torn pec, but my memory could serve me wrong there. But the Raiders definitely need to add some defensive help. Now, Yannick Ngakoue they had last year, he had 10 sacks, and he played off really well with Max Crosby. And they had him under contract, but after signing Chandler, they have since traded him to the Colts in exchange for Rock Ya-Sin, the cornerback, which, I think Yannick's better as a defensive end than the level Rock Ya-Sin is at corner, the Raiders do need some corner help, and they wanted to save salary. They weren't going to pay 3 defensive ends. I shout out Max Ralph if he's watching, the great editor for the Collegian. He pointed out to me when I angrily attacked the Raiders on Twitter for trading Yannick for Rock Ya-Sin. He pointed out to me that Chandler Jones is signed with the Raiders, so shout out Max. But nonetheless, I like this signing for the Raiders because I think Yannick Ngakoue, he's a very solid player, but if you look at his career, his best seasons came when he was playing alongside Calais Campbell, who was the NFL sacks leader that year in Saxonville with the Jags. And last year, Max Crosby was one of the most dominant players on the defensive line in the NFL. I think Yannick really benefits when he has another pass rusher opposite him to take some double teams from those offensive line, and he's able to get to the quarterback on his own. He still had solid seasons when he was by himself, but nothing like he did last year with the Raiders and in 2017 and 2018 with the Jags. Now, I like this fit a lot more for Chandler Jones because those 2 guys, as long as Chandler stays healthy, they're going to be able to get to the quarterback by themselves. They're both elite pass rushers. At least Crosby is. Jones might not be anymore, but he has the name value at the very least, so you got to give him the benefit of the doubt here. I think the Raiders made a really good move to get Chandler Jones here. And one other pass rusher who signed a nice deal today, former Packer, one of my favorite Packers, really, since I've been watching football, Darry Smith returned to the Ravens, the team we originally signed him from 3 off seasons ago. He returns to the Ravens, 4 years, $35 million. That's where he originally made his name. His last year with the Ravens was his first really solid season. I believe he had 8.5 sacks that year. Actually, no, he had double-digit sacks that year. It might have been 10.5. And the Packers signed him to a nice contract. Unfortunately, last year, an injury put him out for pretty much the entire season. He did return in the 49ers playoff game and had a sack in that game, so he looked healthy and rejuvenated. So the Ravens are paying him as such, and they gave him a 4-year deal, and they're going to hope he comes back to a system he's very familiar with and is able to help that defense get better. They tried to sign Justin Houston last year to fill what they're expecting Za'Darius to next year as a pass rusher. He was solid, but not the Justin Houston he used to be. He's a free agent right now. So Za'Darius, they're going to hope he can bounce back from his injury and put a Pro Bowl season together. And they got him on a nice salary. If you compare that to Von Miller and Chandler Jones, who are also aging pass rushers, they're paying him a lot less annually. So I think that's a really good signing for the Ravens. And looking at other things that happened today, the other big story was not a signing, but a release. The Titans released Julio Jones after just 1 season, and it was an injury-filled, disappointing season for Julio in Tennessee. I think everyone can admit that. I don't remember his stats off the top of my head, but they were certainly not anything we're accustomed to seeing from Julio Jones. Now he hits the free agent market, and much like other receivers on this market, Will Fuller, Juju Smith-Schuster, and certainly Allen Robinson being the biggest name in that group, there's a lot of receivers out there that can produce at a very high level, but they haven't in the last year or two. And it's going to be interesting to see what all four of those guys get on the open market. I expect Will Fuller to get the least with all his injuries. I'm expecting a veteran minimum type contract for him. But the other three could command semi-high salary one-year deals. I'm interested to see where all of them go. I would really like to see Julio return to Atlanta if the Deshaun Watson trade goes through for the Falcons. If they're able to acquire him, the Falcons are going to need some receivers because right now all they have is Kyle Pitts and Olamide Zaccheaus. And Kyle Pitts is a tight end. They could certainly draft someone, but I would like to see Julio finish his career in Atlanta, and maybe with an elite quarterback in Watson, he can rejuvenate himself. I would also like to see Allen Robinson there. Maybe they could get both. Or even Will Fuller. He's played with Watson. He has the chemistry. All three of those guys, I think the Falcons should really consider adding at least one, maybe two of them. So that would be a really cool move for the Falcons to make. And just some other tidbits here, just quick ones. They signed Von Miller, but they were busy the rest of the day. They also signed J.D. McKissic, the running back. 2 seasons ago, I believe he had the most receptions in the NFL for any running back with 81 with the football team. So that's a really nice addition to the Bills' backfield alongside Devin Singletary. We'll see what happens with Zach Moss. I think his time there is coming to an end soon. And they also signed O.J. Howard, the former Buccaneers tight end, who I think opposite Dawson Knox could have a lot of success. I think those two could really play off each other well, benefit each other. I think O.J. Howard had a really good thing going 2 seasons ago opposite Gronk in Tampa. He tore his ACL, and last year was a bit part player with the Bills. We'll see if he's able to bounce back from that injury this year. But in that great offense, we saw last year Josh Allen maximized his weapons, and I expect him to do the same this year. So I could see McKissic and O.J. Howard fitting right into that Bills offense. And one last move that I want to mention, the Steelers brought in Myles Jack after he was cut by the Jaguars. 2 years, $16 million, so actually the same salary he was making with the Jags. So he didn't lose any money here for him. He actually got more, obviously, with the 2-year contract. And the Steelers' defense, it's always good. It got better here. They got two inside linebackers, Devin Bush, and Jack to solidify. As long as Joe Schubert also, he might be a free agent, but he was there last year, so they got all kinds of inside linebacker help there. That defense is just going to keep going. And it's going to keep the Steelers at least frisky in their division next year. I don't think they'll make the playoffs with all these great AFC teams coming down the pipeline next year, but they're going to at least compete, especially after they sign Mitchell Trubisky at quarterback. I think he's going to actually have a career season, in my opinion. So after day 3 of free agency, there's still plenty of great players out there. In my video yesterday, I went through a lot of them. Some of them were signed today, but most are still available. So it was certainly the day of the pass rusher, though, with all those 4 guys getting moved around to new teams. I'm really interested to see what happens as we go along now in the coming weeks, because now we're starting to enter the point where guys take more short-term deals. They're more risky deals. So you might see a team, like a contending team, get a nice player for a really cheap price. That always happens. That's always a big deal. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But thank you guys for watching my video today. I appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day. I'm looking forward to the rest of the NFL offseason.